So that part gets at something that I really wanted to talk about today, which is that here is Q, this guy who has loved Margot Roth Spiegelman from afar since he was 2 years old, basically. And he sees her in the hallway and she's laughing at something, and then he thinks maybe she isn't laughing, maybe there's some very funny surprise. She just seems to be sort of pleasantly surprised. And in fact, what is happening is that she is having the most, she's having something terrible happen to her. And he completely misapprehends the entire situation in the way that we often do when we're looking at something from a distance. You know how sometimes you can't tell someone at a distance if they're laughing or crying? You just can tell that they're sort of hysterical, but you can't tell in which direction they're hysterical. That's really at the core of Paper Towns. I mean, Paper Towns is a book about in which everyone is basically misimagining everyone else. Everyone is making assumptions about everyone else that prove to be wrong. Everyone is failing to reflect the complexity of everyone else. And I think that's something that's at kind of the... Okay. I think that's something that's kind of at the core of the human experience, and that I'm really interested in. Like, nerd fighters know this, I think, better, or nerds generally know this better than most people. But we're stuck inside of these, we're stuck inside of our bodies, and we can't ever get out of them, and even if we would maybe sometimes and maybe frequently like to, and that limits the ability that we have to imagine what it's like to be another person, and it also limits the ability that we have to show other people what it's like to be us. And this is where a tremendous amount of human conflict is born, because if you knew what it was like to be me, you wouldn't be mean to me. And if I knew what it was like to be you, I wouldn't make the sort of simplified assumptions about you that I make. Okay, this is an aside, sort of, but when I was a little kid, this is nerd-fantastic, by the way. When I was a little kid, I believed longer than I would care to admit, and in a more serious way than I would care to admit, that I was the only person in the world, like the only human being who was an actual human being, and that everyone else was an alien, and that the Earth had been constructed as a sort of large-scale experiment in what would happen if you tortured a young human being in various ways over like an extended period of time. Like, how long would it take for that young human being to go mad, or just what would happen? And I thought, I thought that my parents were aliens, I thought that Hank was an alien, and I thought that I would go to sleep at night. We had this old school light fixture, and I thought I would go to sleep at night, and the aliens would come down from the light fixture, and they would do some tests to see how I was taking it, and then they would sort of leave me there and make me take more. And it's ridiculous, but it's also kind of. Sarah's saying, what, you've never heard this before? What? Yeah, by the way, if you talk during my presentation, any of you, don't be afraid, I will call you out. Now, any of you and my wife, anybody. No, would you like to share that with the whole class? I'm just kidding. This is true, even if Sarah's denying it's true. But the thing is that I was kind of right, because I am the only person whose personhood I can directly attest to, and who I can be absolutely sure is a person. Like, it is, I will admit, highly statistically improbable that all of you are aliens. But it's not totally impossible. And in the same way, you could be sitting there and you could be thinking, there is a very, very, very small possibility, like the same possibility that the LHC will result in the permanent destruction of the entire universe. That level of possibility, where you get down to purely theoretical numbers that are infinitely close to zero but not zero, that level of possibility exists. That I was brought here today because you have started to wonder if maybe you are the only person in the world and everyone else is an alien, and I was brought here today to make you feel like you're not alone, even though I am secretly an alien, and I am larger conspiracy. It is not probable, but it is possible. And this inability that we have to fully imagine what it's like to be someone else, right? To like fully understand what it's like to be someone else. This inevitably leads to us oversimplifying people and like completely misrepresenting them and misunderstanding them. Another example of this would be, and I talked about this a little bit last night, but another example of this, I would never say that I am a good person, right? Like, I would never, like when I'm thinking about myself in the privacy of my own house, I never think to myself, you know who is a really good guy? Me. But I also don't think that I'm evil, right? So I can do evil things, but I have a justification for them. So I'm not willing to simplify myself into being good or bad or lame or cool or anything, because I'm me. I am this fantastically diverse creation, and so are you, but not to me. That's the problem. The problem is that it's very easy for me to say, like, that guy sucks. I don't like that guy. Well, he doesn't just suck. You know, he sucks sometimes, just like I do. You know, I do terrible, terrible things. I was thinking the other day, just before I left, I was mowing my lawn. When I was mowing my lawn, I was like, this is an awful thing to be doing. Like, what a strange thing it is to be using gasoline, which is a non-renewable resource, to cut this stuff that does not provide me with food or sustenance, does not help the world in any way, and I pour chemicals on it to make sure that it looks the way that I want it to look, which is a completely like random construction of how things should look. I mean, lawns are the craziest, most evil thing you could ever do. And yet I have a total justification for it, which is that if I stopped cutting my lawn, my neighbors would hate me. And I don't want them to hate me, because I want them to feel like, you know, he's a little bit crazy, he's a little bit kooky, but we like him. You know, I want them to like him. So that's what Paper Towns is about. It's about the way that we misimagine each other and whether or not, and to what extent it's possible to kind of get inside someone else and to let other people inside of you, which is just as hard, I think. And I think in a limited way, not in an unlimited way, but in a limited way, I would argue that it is possible, independent of the events that occur in Paper Towns. I would argue that it is possible, and I would argue the way that is possible, one of the ways, at least, is through stories.